Hey Rockets fans. I've been watching this team since I was 16, and while I never got to see how incredible this team was in the mid-late 2000s with both T-Mac and Yao, although I know the unfortunate injury bug both players were hindered by throughout their careers and in Houston, I only got to watch YouTube clips and the Clutch City documentary to see how Houston won the championship in 94 and in 95. I did get to watch Harden evolve into his prime, see us come back for some amazing victories, and by proxy, I also got to see some super frustrating losses. I have a few notable games that I'm sure some people will also remember. That's what this video is going to be about. The most frustrating games I had the displeasure of sitting through. Don't worry, I won't bring up the disgusting game where we set a record for most missed threes because that one's a little bit too painful. And too soon. 9/11. For the first game, I'm going to have to mention Game 6 of our series against the Spurs in 2017. This was one of those games where, as soon as it was over, you can already hear the articles that were about to be written. On top of coming off of having one of the worst looking finishes with fucking old ass Manu blocking James just a game prior, we have Game 6 arguably being way worse. For the main reason being A, we got blown out, and B, Harden was the 5th leading scorer that game with a paltry 10 points, as well as only shooting 11 shots. I think after this is when I kept hearing that Harden was never aggressive enough when it came to the big time moments. Sure, he had other performances like this. When we made that crazy comeback in Game 6 with the Los Angeles Clippers, he was sitting on the bench while the bench kept up the momentum. The cherry on top was that Kawhi Leonard, their best player, was also a DNP for that game, which is just brutal. There was no excuse, and it showed with the amount of criticism our club faced after the loss. I think this was the nail in the coffin that Harden needed another star beside him, and a few months later, we got our boy CP3. Another terrible loss was watching the Rockets face off against the Atlanta Hawks in February 2017. This seems weird since it's just a regular season game, but I don't know, it's one of those games where you get so frustrated, you singe it into your memory. The thing that was frustrating about this game was that we blew a 20-point lead with 8 freaking minutes left in regulation. The score was 77-97, but of course, I watched that filthy lead trickle down until eventually, we lost the game with the final score of 113-108. Dude, not only was it awful watching us miss a bunch of shots this quarter, especially since I think the guys on the floor started noticing the momentum start shifting, and they violently started playing more and more desperate. Then, that led to Atlanta's Tim Hardaway Jr. having the 4th quarter of his life, exploding for 21 points in the quarter. Yeah, seeing that had me fuming, and I remember that really had me bothered for the rest of the night. What about you guys? Is there any game that comes to mind when remembering annoying losses? Please, I'd love to hear about it below. Maybe I'll even remember that game. The next game actually doesn't involve Houston, but it definitely involves our boy Harden, in some way. Remember how our guy was always in the top 2 for MVP discussion? In 2016, it was him versus Steph. Then in 17, it was him versus Westbrook. And I think in 18, it was him versus LeBron. And then a year later, it was him versus Giannis. That's pretty crazy how he finished as the runner-up for 3 years, almost consecutively, being that he actually won it in 2018. Well, the game that I'm talking about happened in 2017, and it was when Westbrook scored an insane 50-point triple-double, and on top of that, he hit the game winner. Now, to give a little context, I'd say this was definitely the closest MVP race I ever saw Harden involved in, and this happened in April, so pretty near the end of the regular season, where a lot of judges might have recency bias. Seeing all that happened cemented it for me. Even though of course I was watching history and it was a great game, I couldn't help but feel the award was Russell's at that point to lose. I felt Harden was being robbed a little, which sounds silly to say, but all I kept hearing throughout the entire season by my friends was that, oh, it's history being made, you have to give it to Russell, it's history, it's a triple-double, almost never been done before unless by the likes of Oscar Robertson. I get and understand all of that, and to those people who were so anal about that being the number one reason why Russell should win the MVP, I didn't hear any of them vouch or push for Russell winning the next year's league MVP, despite literally also averaging a fucking triple-double. So, what's the excuse there? Oh, he already did it. No, he couldn't do it again. He already... what would you want him to do it twice? That's boring. And here's a side note, but you know what I love? I love when sometimes when chasing for that triple-double, both Westbrook and Harden would sometimes turn the ball over a lot. I mean, a lot. More than 10 times. And that would lead to the term quadruple-double or triple-trouble. I mean, their usage rate was so insanely high for those years, you gotta forgive a few duds. Alright, to finish this off, I'll talk about one more Rockets loss that, for whatever reason, stuck with me more than the others. And for the last entry, it'll actually be the playoff series Harden played with Los Cohetes de Houston. Ooh, sheesh! You like that little Spanish? Yep. All 4 painful back-to-back losses to the Los Angeles Lakers in 2020 during the bubble. The entire season, we were mediocre at best with Russell now joining the club. It felt like we just didn't have enough firepower to compete with any real competition, and our defense was atrocious, with arguably one of the worst pairings defensively in our backcourt with Westbrook and Harden. Dude, I'm pretty sure if my fat ass was steaming downhill, they'd have a hard time guarding me. Psych! Well, they barely made it through OKC, and the Lakers just simply dominated the series besides dropping the first game. It just felt like I was watching my team being slowly beaten to death. And there was no moment of the series where I felt like the Rockets could surprise them with some crazy 3-point performance, because our roster consisted of Westbrook, Austin Rivers shooting an amazing 19% from 3, and Eric Gordon shooting an uncharacteristic 25% from 3-point land that series. Yeah, there was no way we were beating that team. Right now, that's all that comes to mind in terms of our losses. I think I've been tilted enough remembering these games, so I think this is where the video is going to end. Again, please type below or send an email letting me know if there are any games that stick out in your memory for being blood boiling.